Welcome back to LexTalks, legal topics simplified, where we break down some of those complex legal concepts. And today we're going to be focusing on something that's pretty relevant to all of us living in India.
Especially in India.
Yeah, especially in India, noise pollution.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to be looking at some really interesting legislation. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the Noise Pollution Control and Regulation Rules of 2000
Okay.
and the National Green Tribunal Act of 2010.
All right.
And we'll be focusing specifically on the establishment and composition of the NGT,
Okay.
powers and jurisdiction of the NGT.
Sounds good.
All right, so, as law students, this is a topic that you're going to encounter throughout your studies and also in your daily lives.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating how much depth there is to this. It's not just about, telling people to be quiet.
Right.
There's a whole legal framework built around this.
There is. So let's start with the Noise Pollution Control and Regulation Rules of 2000.
Okay.
What's the sort of big idea behind these rules?
Well, imagine you're trying to study for your law exams.
Right.
And there's construction going on right outside your window.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to be a very conducive environment, is it?
No.
These rules are all about setting limits on noise levels in different settings.
Okay.
So whether you're in a residential area, an industrial zone,
Right.
or even a silent zone, like around a hospital.
I've seen those signs up around hospitals, like no honking, stop
Silent zone.
Those signs are there for a reason,
Yeah.
and these rules give them legal backing.
So it's not just a general, keep it down kind of thing?
No, it's very specific. What if we have, a major industrial plant
Right.
that's causing excessive noise pollution?
Okay.
This is where the National Green Tribunal Act of 2010 comes in.
That's right.
Right.
The NGT is like a specialized court,
Okay.
specifically designed to handle environmental cases.
And so how does that work? What makes the NGT so special?
Well, one of the things that makes it unique is its composition.
Okay.
You see, in a regular court, you usually just have judges.
Right.
But the NGT also includes expert members.
Expert members.
People with backgrounds in environmental science, engineering, forestry, you name it.
So they're not just looking at the legal side of things.
Exactly. They bring in their expertise.
Oh, that's really interesting. So
Yeah.
they can provide, a more holistic perspective.
Precisely.
Huh?
And that's crucial in environmental cases where you need to understand both the law
Right.
and the science.
Okay. So we've got this specialized body, the NGT, with its team of experts.
Right.
But what kind of power do they actually have? What can they do about these environmental violations?
The NGT's powers are actually quite extensive.
Okay.
They can issue orders to stop polluting activities,
Right.
impose fines, direct companies to compensate for environmental damage,
Okay.
even force them to restore the environment they've harmed.
So they have some real teeth.
They do.
And where does this authority come from?
This authority stems from the NGT Act of 2010,
Okay.
and specifically Section 15 of the Act.
Okay.
That's where they get the power to grant relief compensation,
Right.
even order the restoration of a damaged environment.
So it's not just about punishing the polluters.
Right.
It's about actually trying to fix the problem.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating.
It is. And we'll see how this plays out in some real-world cases.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear about these cases because I feel like that's where we're really going to see this come to life.
Absolutely.
So let's take a quick break and then we'll dive into some of those specific examples.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're back and we're talking about the NGT and noise pollution.
Mhm.
For law students, understanding these cases is really helpful because it kind of gives you a sense of what you might face.
Absolutely. You can see the theory come to life
Right.
in these real-world scenarios.
So before the break, we were talking about the NGT's power under Section 15
Yes.
of the NGT Act.
Right.
Can you give us a concrete example of how that's been used to deal with a noise pollution issue?
Sure. One case that comes to mind involved a residential area
Okay.
that was located near a busy highway,
Okay.
and the constant traffic noise
Right.
was exceeding the permissible limits
I can imagine.
set by the noise pollution rules of 2000.
So it was really impacting the residents.
Absolutely. It was making their lives miserable.
So they decided to take action.
They did. They filed an application with the NGT,
Okay.
and they presented evidence of the noise levels,
Sure.
showed how they were violating the rules,
Okay.
and they requested the NGT to direct the authorities to take measures to reduce the noise.
So they weren't going after individual drivers or anything.
No, they were targeting the entity responsible for the highway.
Right, for managing the highway.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is where Section 15 comes in.
Right.
The NGT reviewed the evidence, heard both sides,
Uh-huh.
and then issued an order
Okay.
directing the highway authority to implement noise reduction measures.
And did they actually do it?
They did. The NGT even set a timeline.
Wow. So the residents actually got relief.
They did. And it shows that these rules have teeth.
Right.
The NGT can enforce them,
Yeah.
hold violators accountable,
Even if it's a government agency.
even if it's a government agency.
That's pretty powerful.
It is.
Now, let's say there's a situation where a factory is technically operating within those noise limits.
Okay.
They're set by the rules.
Right.
But the type of noise it's producing is still super disruptive.
Okay.
Can the NGT do anything in that case?
That's a great question, and it highlights an important aspect of the NGT.
Okay.
You see, while they do have those specific decibel limits,
Right.
they also consider the overall impact on the environment and public health.
Okay.
So even if a factory is technically compliant,
Right.
if the noise is causing significant harm,
Uh-huh.
they might still step in.
So it's not just about the numbers, it's about the actual experience of the people.
Exactly. It's about the lived experience.
That's really important.
It is. There's a case that illustrates this really well.
Okay, what happened?
It involved a religious institution that was using loudspeakers for prayers.
Okay.
And while the noise levels were technically within the limits,
Okay.
the residents argued that the constant repetitive nature of the sound was very disturbing.
Right, like it could be within the limit, but if it's constant, it's
Exactly.
still going to be annoying.
It was affecting their quality of life.
Right. So that sounds like a tricky situation.
It was a balancing act.
Yeah. Because religious freedom is important,
Absolutely.
but so is the right to peace and quiet.
Right. And this is where the NGT's multidisciplinary approach is so valuable.
So how do they handle it?
Well, they recognize the importance of religious practice,
Okay.
but they also acknowledge the residents' right to a peaceful environment.
Okay.
So they directed the institution to modify their loudspeaker usage.
So they found a middle ground.
They did. They found a compromise.
It seems like they're very good at finding that balance,
They try to consider all sides.
and that's why studying these cases is so important.
It is. You can see how they apply the law in different situations.
And it's not always black and white.
Exactly. It's nuanced.
This is all really fascinating.
It is.
And I think we have time for one more case.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so we're back and ready for another case study. I feel like these cases are so helpful for law students.
Oh, they're invaluable. You really see how these laws play out in real life.
All right, so this next case, I think it's one that everyone in India can relate to. It's the case against firecrackers during Diwali.
Ah, yes, that was a landmark case. It really brought up the whole debate about tradition versus environment, you know?
Right, because Diwali is such a big festival.
Absolutely, and the use of firecrackers is a huge part of the celebration.
But then there's the noise and air pollution.
Exactly. So the NGT had to find a way to balance these competing interests.
So did they just ban firecrackers outright?
No, actually, they didn't. They took a more nuanced approach.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, they imposed restrictions on the type of firecrackers allowed.
Okay.
They set time limits for when they could be used.
Right.
And they even specified permissible noise levels.
So it was about regulating the use rather than banning it completely?
Exactly. It was about finding that middle ground between tradition and environmental protection.
And I think that's what makes the NGT so effective. They're not just about blindly enforcing rules.
Right. They try to consider the broader context, the social, cultural factors.
It's about finding solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly. And, another area where that's really evident is in cases involving noise pollution from religious places.
Oh, yeah, that's a sensitive issue.
It is. You have to balance religious freedom with the right to a peaceful environment.
Because these places often use loudspeakers, for prayers announcements.
Right. And that can lead to complaints from residents.
So how does the NGT handle those situations?
Well, they typically look at the specific circumstances, the time of day, the duration of the noise, the overall impact on the community.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. And in many cases, they've directed religious institutions to adhere to those permissible noise limits and those time restrictions for using loudspeakers.
So again, finding that balance.
Absolutely. It's about ensuring that religious practices don't infringe on the well-being of others.
This has been such an insightful discussion. I mean, learning about these cases, it really brings the complexities of environmental law to life.
It does, and it shows how the NGT is using its authority to shape a more sustainable and just future for India.
And, for our listeners out there who are studying law, remember, this is just a glimpse into this fascinating field.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep advocating for a healthier environment.
That's all the time we have for today. But we hope you found this deep dive into noise pollution and the NGT helpful. And as always, thanks for listening to Lex Talks.
And remember, knowledge is power. So keep learning, keep questioning, and let's work together to create a better world.